Hailey Thompson, at 32, was living what many would label a dream life. She was the marketing director of a swanky interior design firm in Seattle, married to her perfect husband, Michael, with a little bun in the oven. Yes, from the outside, everything was set for a fairy tale ending: career, love, and impending motherhood. Little did she know, however, that beneath this glossy surface lay a truth that was anything but perfect, waiting to shatter her idyllic world. Her nagging fear was betrayal, something she never uttered aloud. This wasn't born from past trauma, it was more like a jarring premonition that flicked on and off in her mind like a faulty light bulb. Michael had been everything one could wish for: devoted, affectionate, the ideal husband. But this tantalizing fear was creeping forward, preparing to play a nasty game, starting with a simple, ominous phone call that would change everything. One fateful afternoon, while nestled on the floor, folding a tiny yellow Odyssey, her phone rang with a jarring urgency. As she adjusted her growing belly and answered, a deep voice on the other end sent her heart into a tailspin. Your husband, Michael Thompson, was in a car accident, heart failure. But he wasn't alone. Those words reverberated in her mind, leaving her palms sweaty and her heart racing. She tried to convince herself that surely he had just been carpooling with a colleague, wouldn't he? But that small, persistent voice in her head whispered doubts she wasn't ready to entertain. The drive to Mercy General Hospital felt like a slow-motion nightmare. Every second dragged on, and the officer's words clung to her like a shadow. He wasn't alone. What if Michael was with another woman? Panic gripped her as stoplights became mini hassle hurdles, each taking too long to clear. By the time she reached the hospital, the smell of disinfectant hit her like a brick wall, a stark contrast to her earlier fantasies of family bliss. He's in the ER. The receptionist's explanation barely penetrated the ringing in Hailey's ears. She stumbled toward the indicated hallway, her mind racing with questions, each step heavier than the last. Was it merely a freak accident? Or was there something rotten lurking in her perfect life? Surely it couldn't be true, could it? After what felt like an eternity, Hailey met a nurse who bluntly informed her that while Michael was stable, he had a fractured arm and some abrasions. Then came a casual but gut-wrenching addition: his passenger is in the bed next door. The nurse's words hit her like a freight train. Breathing felt miraculous as she processed this new layer of dread, and she instinctively glanced at the admission form, and there it was, the name. Jessica Ramirez. A punch to the gut, she reeled. Jessica Ramirez. The sweet neighbor who had just come over with pregnancy advice and a reassuring grip on Hailey's hand. The betrayal cut deeper than any hospital bandage. How could someone she regarded as a friend be at the center of this storm? As the pieces of her flawless life began to slip away, Hailey could only wonder how she would face the world ahead, now starkly speckled with lies and heartache. The room swirled around me like I had just stepped off a merry-go-round that wouldn't stop. My brain was racing to grasp what had just hit me like a freight train. Jessica had been in the car with Michael. How had I missed the signs? They had been so subtle, like breadcrumbs leading me straight to betrayal. I rubbed my growing belly instinctively. A kick from the baby reminded me I had to be strong. I wouldn't let this heartache unravel me. I felt my legs trembling with each step toward Michael's room, a determined march fueled by adrenaline. The universe had a twisted sense of humor, and I wasn't laughing. I had crafted a perfect little life, complete with blissful marriage and a baby on the way, only to discover it all rested on an unstable facade. I needed answers, the kind that could shatter the illusion I had been living in. As I stood outside the door, I could practically hear the crack in my fairy tale. When I entered the room, the sight before me knocked the wind out of me. There lay Michael, unconscious with a horrid excuse for a minor injury that now felt monumental. But it wasn't just him, the bitch on the bed next to him was Jessica. She looked blissfully unaware of my arrival, staring blankly at the ceiling with that bandage on her forehead, like the universe had tried to warn me. The same Jessica who offered me cake and advice, now the harbinger of my demise. Images flooded my mind, the moments of intimacy between them disguised as friendly banter. How could I have been so oblivious? It wasn't just Michael who had betrayed me. My supposed friend had played me like a puppet while juggling yoga balls. I recalled how she'd been so eager to help me with baby names, like it was all part of her sinister plot. In that instant, she transformed from friend to villain, the revelation chilling as the truth sunk in. Just then, Michael stirred and whimpered, dragging me back to the present. I didn't want to be in that moment. Confronting him felt impossible. But I knew I couldn't evade it forever. His eyes fluttered open, and our gazes locked. A rush of fear coursed through him when he saw me, eclipsed by guilt. Gone was the charming man I once adored. This was someone who understood the magnitude of his betrayal and its catastrophic aftermath. "Hailey," he muttered, his voice hoarse, searching for reassurance in my eyes. Oh, how I wished I could give him that. But answers were the last thing on my mind. I stood frozen, the tidal wave of questions crashing over me, simmering with rage. He looked as if he wanted to reach out, but the air was heavy with the realization that he had forfeited his right to do so. It was like a tragic play, and the final act was yet to commence. When and how would I unleash my true fury? Every muscle in my body was wound up, fighting against the urge to unleash a volcanic eruption. No longer the naive partner, I was ready to peel away the layers of lies obscuring the truth. In a melodrama worthy of a soap opera, we were tangled in an emotional battlefield, and I had just realized I stood on the brink. My heart may have been heavy, yet I was determined not to let them win. The show was just beginning, and I wasn't leaving the stage without a fight. Jessica's gaze darted to mine, and within that electrified moment, time stood still. The air in the room grew heavy with unease. I could practically cut it with a knife. Words were locked in her throat, her legs swung over the bed as she sat up slowly, trembling hands pushing the sheets aside. Panic twisted her features with the unmistakable clarity. She had been caught red-handed, and the reality of the situation slammed into us like a freight train. I couldn't take it anymore. I snapped at Michael, whose shame was a portrait painted across his face. How long? The question hung in the air, a loaded gun ready to fire. His eyes flitted between me and Jessica, a single tear sliding down his cheek like an unwelcome guest. But no amount of sorrow could salvage this wreckage. Jessica stood, betraying her composure, her bravado cracked under the pressure of my gaze. "Hailey, I didn't mean for this to happen," she stuttered, but honestly, her excuses fell flat. They were nothing but whispers in a howling storm of betrayal. "Oh, you didn't mean for it to happen?" I shot back, the words sharp enough to cut. "This was all planned, wasn't it? The late-night rendezvous, the innocent get-togethers, just a well-executed game to you." I stepped closer, and I could almost sense her retreating heartbeat. I was the unwitting pawn in their game, and as I swept the pieces from the table, I felt a storm brewing within me. Michael curled into himself on the bed, as if hoping to disappear into oblivion while Jessica attempted to mount a defense. But her words rang hollow, more like desperate gasps than any semblance of actual regret. She found herself ensnared in a web spun too tightly to be undone. The truth was, she wanted to fix things, but the reality was irreparable. There was no going back, no magic eraser large enough to wipe this slate clean. Shaking with fury, I turned away, the weight of betrayal heavier than any physical blow. This was not merely infidelity, it was an artful manipulation of trust, the sanctity of my family ripped apart. I had cherished Jessica like a sister and shared my life with her. How could she have turned the knife and twisted it with such a perfectly crooked smile? Anger surged inside me, hot and relentless. I needed to extract myself from this chaotic symphony of deceit. Exiting the hospital room felt like stepping into a different universe. I was no longer just Hailey Thompson, the woman left shattered by betrayal. I was a woman on a mission. The hurt mirrored a raw battlefield, but it couldn't hold me captive any longer. The path to regaining my footing was charted, and I would make sure that those responsible faced the consequences of their cowardice. Evelyn, Michael's overbearing mother, came to mind. She had always tried to control him, and her influence was key. She had no idea her son's world was crumbling. I might have been wounded, but I was also armed with knowledge, and I was ready to turn the tables. Using the very people Michael had used for his own twisted gains would be my first strategic move. I would grasp control before they had the chance to make excuses, to hide behind their tangled lies. The game was on, and this time, I would write the rules. Evelyn was the queen of the chessboard, but little did she know I held the king's card. Years of watching her tighten her grip on Michael like an overzealous stage mom had finally lit a fire under me. Time to flip the script. I reached out to a few loyal comrades, the ones Michael had snubbed with his obnoxious swagger. They were itching to take a swing at him, and I had precisely the bait to rally them into action without alarming the target. These colleagues had personal vendettas, unfulfilled promises, overlooked accolades, and eye rolls at Michael's office theatrics. I drizzled just enough info to ignite their resentment, painting a vision of collective power that could take down the puppet master. Imagine a motley crew of disgruntled employees, each one secretly craving the sweet taste of revenge while we plotted our corporate coup. I could already picture their expressions, wild-eyed and jubilant at the prospect of taking down the mighty Michael. Yet, amid my scheming, I recognized the true heavyweight, Evelyn. She was more than merely a mother, she was a business sorceress, whose influence rippled through the company like a quiet storm. Facing her directly was like trying to wrestle a hurricane. I had to begin with Michael, for his habitual need for his mother's approval was the Achilles heel in our little drama. A few strategic nudges in the right direction could leave Evelyn biting her nails in the boardroom, wondering how her perfect son had become such a colossal failure. As I dived deeper into the company's shady dealings, the gears began to turn in my favor. I didn't have to go toe-to-toe with Michael or Evelyn, I could quietly, oh so casually unearth their mismanagement and errors while sprinkling shame like confetti. Their empire, built on a shaky foundation of deceit, was about to crumble. All I needed was to be patient as I methodically clipped away at their carefully constructed facade. Then there was Jessica, the cherry on top of this dramatic sundae. She wasn't just a secret partner, she was a well-placed pawn in Michael's elaborate game where he marketed himself as the dutiful family man. But that cutie act wouldn't earn her a safety net once the truth hit. She had woven her own web of lies, and guess what? She was about to be ensnared in it like a flies to honey. The more I observed Jessica, the more intriguing her contradictions became. She radiated sympathy, yet beneath that sugary exterior lay competitive instincts and an undeniable hunger for what others had. Michael had filled a void for her, but now she wore her guilt like a badge. With every guilty glance, she seemed more aware of the chaos she'd helped instigate. Little did she know she had reinforced my plans to expose them, making them her fall from grace that much sweeter. Like a master strategist, I laid the trap with precision. Michael's pride would have him clinging to his mistakes like a toddler with their favorite toy, while Jessica's guilt would make her an easy target. I kicked back, allowing the tension to bubble while focusing on the grand finale. It wasn't merely about unraveling an affair, it was about orchestrating a spectacular collapse of their world. Their overconfidence was a flaw I intended to exploit to amplify the fallout. The climax of my plan hinged on one final push, revealing Michael's financial misdeeds that threatened Evelyn's grip. My allies were poised and ready, collecting evidence as if they were kids on a scavenger hunt. Just a little more intel, and I would have the devastating piece that could unravel not only Michael's professional life but also the very foundation of loyalty he'd banked upon. The truth was on its way, and it would be a showstopper they'd never see coming. The moment the evidence hit the table, everyone froze. It was like someone pressed the pause button on a movie. I had Jessica pinned against the wall, not literally, of course, but close enough. I had her secret tucked away, knowing she'd been getting her hands dirty with Michael just as much as he had with her. It was a dirty game they played, and now I was holding the cards, and boy, did it feel fabulous. Every move I made sent tremors through their lives, like a game of Jenga gone wrong. Michael, once the golden boy of the company, watched his reign crumble as swiftly as a toddler's block tower. And Jessica. Her reputation had more holes in it than Swiss cheese. Despite Mommy Evelyn's valiant efforts to shield her son, my machinations were unstoppable. As I reveled in their downfall, I realized my revenge was a 2-for-1 special. It wasn't just sweet, it was downright delicious. The real coup de grace came at the quarterly meeting, the ideal stage for my grand reveal. I could practically hear the dramatic soundtrack playing in my head as I waited in the back of the conference room. Michael waltzed in, looking like a king, with Evelyn trailing behind like a worried jester. Little did they know, I had set the ultimate trap, waiting for their moment in the limelight to shatter like glass. As the meeting fluttered along, Michael delivered his usual smooth-talking spiel, cloaked in confidence like a magician concealing a trick. But when he signaled for questions, I rose from my seat like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Silence blanketed the room as all eyes melted onto me, especially Michael's, which flashed a panicked expression that screamed, "What have I done?" Oh, this was going to be good. Without a hint of hesitation, I laid out the entire sordid saga, facts and irrefutable evidence flying around like confetti at a New Year's party. I unveiled documents, emails, and texts that showcased Michael's treachery like a juicy, scandalous headline. The betrayal hung heavy in the room, and I watched as the realization dawned on everyone. The way he spun lies to protect his throne? All gone, evaporated into thin air like a magician's rabbit. Michael struggled to muster a defense, but honestly, it was more cringe than convincing. The stunned silence was palpable, and I could almost hear the proverbial pin drop. I couldn't resist breaking that silence, my voice slicing through the air with a chilling edge. "How long, Michael?" I demanded, the tension palpable as his features distorted with guilt. His failure to respond was a confession in itself, and like a perfectly ripe fruit, the truth was finally revealed. He glanced nervously at Jessica, his partner in crime, but the hourglass was up. Tears threatened to spill, and yet, none of it mattered now. Meanwhile, Evelyn's face morphed from disbelief to uncontainable rage. She shot up from her seat, the embodiment of a mama bear defending her cub. The tension in the air was electrifying, and I savored every moment. This was the climax of a thrilling saga, drama, deception, and my victory all wrapped in a messy bow. In a dramatic turn of events, she attempted to play the blame game, hoping to shield her son from the fallout. But let's be real, her influence couldn't save him this time. The overwhelming evidence laid bare before everyone was like a grand reveal, and her usual air of command evaporated. I had surprised her by being willing to go the extra mile for the truth. This was not just any showdown, this was my moment of liberation, and I was standing firm. As the murmurs crescendoed into a wave of gossip, I watched Michael's face bleed of color. The charming facade was shattered, unveiling a stunned man grappling with the reality of his crumbling empire. He was losing everything, his reputation, career, and even the illusion of family. I calmly walked out of the room, knowing I didn't need to hear any half-hearted excuses. It wasn't just revenge, it was me reclaiming my life from the clutches of manipulation and betrayal. Settling into my new apartment felt surreal. The walls were bare, reflecting the emptiness I thought I'd feel. Everything once familiar, my past life, memories, and even Michael, now seemed like a distant tale. Don't get me wrong, I didn't find joy in the chaos I had caused. But lurking beneath the surface of that devastation was something powerful, freedom. A new path lay ahead, paved with the choices I had finally made for myself. The day after the explosive meeting, Michael seemed to turn up the desperation dial. His calls and texts were frequent, almost pitiful. He begged for another chance, yet his sweet nothings were nothing more than repeated tricks. No more sneaky manipulation would work on me. His world, built on deceit, was collapsing, and I was happy to watch it all tumble down without any regrets. Evelyn, his usual sidekick, couldn't put the genie back in the bottle either. As I pulled away from that tumultuous chapter, I knew it wasn't just Michael affected. Jessica, too, was standing on shaky ground. Her affair had not just cost us our marriages but spit in the face of her own future. The truth had no mercy, and her world of deception had come crashing down. David, her husband, had filed for divorce, marking the end of a fairy tale gone wrong. Jessica was left in the ruins of her own making, and I chose not to dwell on her fate. Thoughts of my future began to spark like gentle fireworks in the night sky. This wasn't an act of vengeance anymore, it was about moving onward to something better. As I rebuilt my life brick by brick, the weight began to lift. With each step away from those old shadows, I breathed easier. I felt empowered knowing I had fought for myself and my son. My old world, cluttered with lies, had vanished, replaced with a newfound strength. At night, I'd gaze at my son tucked safely in his crib, a little fortress of my own making. Gratitude washed over me. This was my redemption arc. The narrative I was crafting now far outweighed the past pain. I was not just a victim anymore. I was a warrior who emerged from the ashes, sharper and more determined. While Michael and Jessica's saga met its sad end, mine was just beginning, bursting with possibilities I never dared to dream before. Though the memories of betrayal lingered, they no longer held power over me. I had reclaimed my life and transformed it into something enriching and free. There was so much waiting in the wings for me. I smiled, holding on to the hope and determination that filled my sails now. With everything I had gone through and learned, a new journey awaited, blossoming with love,